On this episode of Athletes Anonymous Presents After the Buzzer, we're going to be talking about Lonzo Ball, Michael Jordan, Dame Lillard, the MVP race, the play-in games, and everything in between. Let's get to that intro music. And welcome back to the podcast. I am your co-host, Keone McKeague, and with me as always are my longtime friends and co-hosts, Jared Shirai, Nolan Chang. Say what's up to the pod, boys.
What a beautiful week for the Lakers to lose stress and lose more hair.
It's funny because those, for all intents and purposes, they definitely have been kind of, building something there, especially over these last few weeks. In fact, because it just happened, we're going to throw it over to you first, Nolan. We got Austin Reeves kind of having himself a hell of a year. First and foremost, one, is he the type of player that looks great playing on a team that has championship aspirations and may not look that way when they sign him to inevitably some sort of big contract and he gets moved? I'll speak in the vein of a guy like Davis Bertans, who had a hell of a year, got his big contract, and just disappeared off the map. Is he that guy, or do you think that he has a chance to really kind of kick into that stardom type of deal as a guy who will get his big contract soon?
I think he has value on any team. I don't think he's like a Bertans. Because Bertans originally, before he was started moving around, he was known for being that kind of stretch forward shooter, not necessarily much else. Reeves himself is a very high IQ player. We saw flashes of it last year at the end of his rookie season when they started resting a lot more players and gave him a lot more time on the court. One of the few rookies who was able to achieve a triple-double in their rookie season. So that was already kind of like a good indicator. This season, there is a part of me, and this is biased as a Lakers fan, but there is a part of me that thinks he very well could have been one of the top 5 candidates for Sixth Man of the Year if he didn't have to play behind Russell coming off as Sixth Man for most of the season. He's already averaging, I think it's like 12, 4, and 3 right now as it is. And Brogdon, I think, is the high candidate for Sixth Man of the Year, and he's averaging 14, 4, and 4. So it's like 6 of one, half a dozen the other. Maybe they'll make a weird little nominee push as we get to the very end of the season, but I think his play and his chemistry alone with LeBron, because they're both very IQ-esque players, plays off of each other very well. And if he was ever to leave the Lakers, I guarantee he would find a good role on another team. Or do I think he's going to be an all-star, elite, Hall of Famer? Probably not. But outside of the injuries, I see him maybe as he could potentially reach the ceiling of being a Gordon Hayward, going around to different teams where he's not necessarily the most athletic, but he can hit that outside shot. He can handle the ball. He plays defense pretty solidly. And he's a very good role guy.
Remind me, how did he come to you guys? Is he
was unsigned,
or is he just
signed on with the summer league?
Okay. That's kind of what I thought.
I think him and Mac McClung were like the two that were showing out during summer league. And then they signed him to, I think, a two-way deal for his first couple seasons right off.
And is he one of those kind of super seniors type of deal? Was he there for a while with his college team?
Oh, actually, I don't know about that one.
I feel like is he fairly older as far as
actually check that. I don't know if he stayed the whole 4 years. Oh, he's 24, so yeah, he did his 4 years as a senior, and then went unsigned, then picked up by the Lakers on his rookie season, and then this is his second season. So he is technically on a player option, I believe, for restricted. No, not player option. He's just restricted free agent this next offseason. But because of his play, a lot of analysts are saying that it could be upwards for a $50 million multi-year deal, which I think the Lakers should,
which is why I brought up
definitely give him his scratch.
Right on. I'm going to kind of throw it over to you, Jared, because I know Nolan kind of mentioned it already as far as like the player awards are kind of concerned. This wasn't something I was wondering if, because I know they debated it on First Take, and I thought it was a very interesting concept. I was like, do you kind of feel like when it comes to like the player awards that play should be more at the forefront of said player awards, or are you focusing on kind of the win-loss records for these players' teams as well? Like, does it have to be one or the other, or do you think that there could be sort of like more of a balance? Because if you look at some of the top candidates for some of these awards, a lot of them are from winning teams or championship caliber teams. I mean, we got Norman Powell from the Clippers, Tyrese Maxey from the 76ers, and we got Malcolm Brogdon from the Celtics. Though a lot of people would probably, like Austin Reeves, make a good case for being Sixth Man of the Year if he were in more of a winning situation, considering that the Lakers didn't really have that hot of a start this year.
I would say win-loss record does have a lot to do with it, because especially as a sixth man or coming off the bench, you have to contribute to a winning culture. Sorry. Contribute to a winning culture. Especially in the Sixth Man of the Year award, right? You want to give your starters rest, and you want to give them that's your time to shine, right? They're talking about how that's why Westbrook moved to that role. It made him a little more comfortable in the things that he is, and the things that he does. So as far as that goes, I would say it does have to. I don't think it should play as big a factor as it does, but I know it in all, like, overviewing everything, I think it does. Like, you look at the MVP. You're not going to take the MVP from a
multiple reasons why Kobe was not
39 team right now
during his big stretches.
You know what I mean?
I'll put another scenario out there for you. Say, for instance, you have a guy like Dame Lillard, right, who's having one hell of a season. He's carrying his team. If, for instance, that guy makes it into a 6 seed, he's not winning a lot, he's not losing a lot, but he's winning the games that he's a part of because he's the driving force for their team. Do you think that a guy like that deserves a shot at kind of getting an MVP because he's on a losing team, but he's making them win? Or is this more of like where you have say you have the Boston Celtics, who are probably a little bit more stacked, but Jason Tatum's winning MVP because his team's a number 1 seed as opposed to a number 6 seed? Like, do you kind of feel like that is something that's missed for these big awards, or are you kind of still riding with like the idea that you need to be the winning team?
It's kind of yes and no, but I mean, to be honest, like, I would want my MVP to have a winning record. Like, that's just straight far none. And you look at that Western Conference, like I'm looking at it right now, and 7 through whatever is all either even or they're under. And right now, Portland's 9 games out of being 500. So, I mean, even if they were able to get to that 6th seed, like, Golden State's only 37 and 36. Like, even for me, like, putting Steph into that, or Clay, or anybody, or Jordan Poole, anybody into that, I would say, for me personally, and I know everybody has different views, but you got to be in like the top 3, top 4 of your, I would say top 3 of your conference, because they take the top 6, right? So I would want it to be from the best 3 teams, like, if that's my MVP. Like, that's why I know Jokic. That's why Embiid's still right there, because he's like their 3rd place right now, you know? Giannis is their 1st in their conference. But I mean, for me, it has to be a winning record at least. And then, of course, you want to make sure that these players are having like great seasons, with their team, and leading them in the right ways. I mean, I'm not going to say Damon's not leading them in the right ways, but yeah, he can have an amazing, outstanding season. But I don't know if that's enough to just say, hey, that's the MVP, because you're not winning fucking games. In the long run, that's literally what it is. You're not winning games. You're not producing as a team rather than an individual, even though, like we said, this is more individual awards, but you still have to look at basketball as a team aspect and what creates a great team. As we get to MVP talks, I'll get more into that.
I'm throwing it over to you, Nolan. I mean, we're going to kind of start the conversation on Dame Lillard because, as I kind of prefaced with you guys before, prior to kind of his latest run of games, he had basically an argument. I forgot if it was on a podcast or maybe it was on some kind of interview, but he essentially said that he doesn't like this idea of ring culture. So when it comes to players like himself who stay true to his team, have been on his team since he was drafted, and kind of him trying to get the team to build a championship culture, he's been upset at people kind of placing him lower than where he thinks he deserves to be as far as like ranking all-time players, because of this idea of ring culture, because there are guys who leave their teams because they win a championship. Now all of a sudden they're, propelled higher than he is. And that was, his entire argument. He doesn't like the idea that because he won't win one or possibly won't win one, that he'll be placed lower all time. And he thinks that there should be more of an emphasis on the player themselves. This kind of feeds into what we just were talking about. I'm throwing it over to you. What do you kind of feel about Dame Lillard's argument for this idea? And more importantly, do you kind of feel like, I was going to say, where do you put him as far as your kind of all-time? I'll say this. I'll put a comparison out there because there's a guy out there that I think he was throwing a subtle dig at, but wasn't really saying it without saying it kind of deal. Looking at a guy like Kyrie Irving and then looking at a guy like Dame Lillard, both, historically great players. Like, where do you place Dame Lillard in the spectrum of point guards with a guy like Kyrie Irving? Above, below? What do you think? First, we'll start on the argument and then kind of go to their
for ring culture. It's very dependent on each player, and you have to look at it from what they come into the league and what people are expecting of them. Dame Lillard came into the league expected to be elite and showed that he can be elite. And you have a lot of these guys, and there's nothing wrong with it, a lot of these guys who get into the league and are just trying to do something better for their generational wealth, for their kids, for their family, for the people who took care of them growing up. And they're doing whatever they're doing as hard as they can just to make sure they stay on a roster. Whether it's for $1 million, $2 million a year, that's still more than half of America would ever make in their lifetime. So it really depends. When you look at players like Dame Lillard, people who are prodigy players coming out of college who get into the league are immediately a name that is known to the world. It gets to a point where, yes, you can see it as don't chase a ring culture because you don't want your name to be kind of tarnished in any way because you want to do it the right way. But at this point, the right way becomes very masked in everything that goes on in the league. You take a look at someone like Westbrook. Westbrook, yes, he gets high contracts when he was during his prime years, but no one could ever doubt that Westbrook was a competitor and he loved to win. And it wasn't that he was the first one to have shit with KD when he left to the Warriors, because it was, why can't we just build this here? Why can't we do this here? And it became a point where OKC was in that discussion with Westbrook, like, we can't do much more for you here. I think it's best we look for you to go somewhere else or you sign somewhere else. And that's the same situation I think Dame has in front of him. No one's going to look at him, especially the Portland fan base, and say, oh, he's a traitor, he left us. No, you guys, the organization betrayed him. Like, if they wanted him to win, they would have done something more for him, which is kind of in talk of what we'll go through with later on with Michael Jordan and the Hornets. But I think that I appreciate his pride and his mindset, but at this point, he needs to look elsewhere, and he needs to ask to be in discussions elsewhere, because no one's going to want to look at Dame Lillard 20 years from now and say, oh, yeah, he was in the same vein as Charles Barkley. Oh, he was a great player. Never got a ring, though. It's not one of those things you like to hear about yourself, especially at the end of your career. You can.
So in your kind of roundabout way, are you saying that you believe that he does need a ring in order to kind of solidify his career?
I think he does. And this interview he did only kind of hurts him more, I think, because it makes him sound, I'm not putting words in his mouth, but it makes him sound like, oh, I don't care about a bag. I don't care about winning. I just care about being loyal to this team that I've started with. And that doesn't make sense for someone who is in a pro league. This is your profession, to reach the highest attainable level you can and reach the highest attainable accolade you can in the game of NBA. And that's to win a championship as a team. And for him to say it, it feels like he's giving up on that dream and just saying, I'm happy, I'm loyal to the Portland Trail Blazers. I'm going to ride it out with them. We're going to make something happen. Because if that never comes, then he looks back in that interview saying, like, maybe I should have jumped ship. And it's not even, and we've discussed it before. We don't need him to go to the freaking Warriors and match up with Clay and Steph and Poole and Draymond. Go to a team that maybe has one other all-star. Get picked up there. Start creating something new there. You have to do it now because he's 31, 32? His clock is running out for what his prime years can be, where he'll be valued on any sort of championship run team. So for him, I just think that this looks a lot more, even though it may not be his intention, it looks like he's giving up on that dream of his to get a ring somewhere.
It's funny you saw it like that, because I was going to say initially, it's interesting because that actually makes sense coming from what you just said. But initially when I heard it, I was thinking more like he was mad at the league, I guess. You know what I'm saying? Like, it was more like the league is frustrating because they they have players who, instead of being like, let's win it for our team, like, oh, let's just join our friend and win it on that team instead of, staying where we are. So I saw it more as that, where he was like kind of coming from this idea around the league that people need to be teaming up in order to win is kind of, and it's funny. It's because what you said makes absolute sense, like how you would have interpreted that. But it's interesting because I saw it a completely different way. But how you said it also makes sense as well. So throwing it over to you, Jared, kind of what is your idea? And I'll say this because as the, in the room, elephant in the room, you are the LeBron fan, and we had talked about this previously, right? Even before the Dame Lillard interview came up, we were kind of mentioning how LeBron had started this trend, right, where it was kind of like this, and it was like I think J.R. Smith and Iman Shumpert kind of had they went on a long rant about how it was when it initially happened, right? When LeBron initially joined the Heat, there was kind of this shift
Iman.
in. But they both were on the pod talking about it together, because they both were essentially going in on how it changed the entire outlook of the league, because players were like, oh, wow, that can happen now? Like superstars can join up with each other. What is your take on kind of the idea of ring culture? There are a lot of arguments for, there are a lot of arguments against. The arguments for obviously are in favor of the players themselves. The arguments against, there's numerous ones, but I'm going to throw it to you. What do you kind of feel about ring culture, first and foremost? And second, because actually Nolan didn't even really answer the question, who do you put as far as Kyrie or Dame above? And
What
better
do I
yet,
think of ring culture?
is the Kyrie thing based on his championship, or is it based on the players themselves head to head?
Oh, wow. I like all these questions. Ring culture for me, I get it. Like, I agree with Nolan when he says at the end of the day, it's your job to win a championship. That's why you play the game and do all these things. But being loyal is only gets you so far, right? I would say, and this is where I'm going to get a lot of flack for it, LeBron did not start the ring culture chase. You have the Lakers, who tried to put a whole bunch of superstars to get them a ring together. You had the Boston Celtics, who did the same thing. Like, LeBron just made it to a different level because he did the stupid interview. Like, if he didn't do the big interview, I think that's what changed in basketball when he went to Miami. He did the leave for my, that's literally that. I think that was the biggest hit for it to solidify it, because you look at a lot of teams. Before that, there were a lot of like good big threes. I'm not saying back in the 90s like the Bulls and everybody else where they actually kept it together. But Charles went ring chasing as well. Shaq kind of did the same thing, He kind of like, oh, where's the next best place for me to go, kind of thing. And because it was an opportunity to win a ring. I think every player who leaves a team is always looking to win a ring.
I'm gonna push back on that point a little bit, because mentioning Shaq is a little different because Shaq wasn't really Shaq when he started, chasing onto these other teams. Even when he was with the Heat, it was arguable that he was declining by that point. I guess my point would be, do you think that there are other examples of guys who were literally at the end of their rookie contracts, at the peak of their careers, making these, and not because like the Celtics, another team they were old by the time they all got together. It was literally, they were 4 years out before they did the Brooklyn Nets thing and looked horrible on that team. The Lakers even, they're another one that, at the tail end, Pau Gasol, I guess you could make. The only real big one was the Chris Paul thing, which actually I hadn't even mentioned that. That was another one I was going to get into about the CP3
no, trust
trade.
me, I was gonna.
Did you hear about Gilbert
as you
Arenas?
guys were talking about like rings and
That's
everything.
exactly what I was going to bring up.
That's
the Gilbert
crazy.
Arenas thing, because
Yeah.
it is crazy. Wow. Sorry,
Because
but
it got brought to light of everything of that happened behind the scenes. Of that was the ridiculous part. Yeah. So that like we'll get to that. We'll get to that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
For me, I agree. Like everybody is in the back part of their career, but you talk about like ring culture and everybody needing a ring, and I think that's what the NBA today has come down to. We talk about Chris Paul, right? Chris Paul could be one of the top 3 to 5 point guards in the league if he had a ring.
Talk about Chris Paul in front of Nolan.
You know what I mean? No, like I said, we'll get to it. But it's like players like that where you look at Charles Barkley was one of the most dominant players in his position, and Shaq gives him all kind of shit. It just points always at his fingers because Charles doesn't have a ring. Players like John Stockton, who's a career all time, and he doesn't have a ring. So it's literally, like Nolan said, it's what you play for, but it doesn't define the players that it is. And so I have a plus and minus take to it. Like, I get it, Jordan, everybody uses Jordan has 6 rings. He's the greatest of all time, even though Bill Russell is at 10, and that's why Jordan will always be better than LeBron because LeBron only has 4. And so when it comes down to it, if you want to look at somebody like Dame Lillard, who's an amazing, amazing point guard, amazing athlete, does everything for his team, like literally puts the team on his back every night, day in and day out. And you want to look at him and say, like, he's a quality.
That whole team is on his back.
Top 20, literally like top 25, top 50 player overall. And like you said, to match him up against Kyrie, and if people say yes, that Dame Lillard should be there, then this is my counter to it, is LeBron should be better than Jordan. Because you're looking at rings in that regard. You know what I mean? And so I think it's just really how it's perceived. But to answer your question about the Dame and Kyrie, since Nolan didn't answer it, it's hard for me to say because I've talked Kyrie up. His off-court antics are like by far the worst things in the world. But for me, Kyrie's the best finisher in the game. He can get to the basket. He's got the moves. He's done all what he needs to do. Yeah, he got help when he got his rings. But if Kyrie doesn't have the ball in the last seconds of that game against Golden State, I'll say it honestly, then Cavs don't win that game. Because Kyrie's that guy. He's a finisher. He's going to put the dagger there. And that's what Dame Lillard is too. And it's just so hard to say like who's better because they both bring different things. Dame's going to shoot that half-court shot and make it 9 out of 10 times. Kyrie's going to shoot that shot.
I was just saying,
3 out of 10. 3 out of 10
for
times.
argument's sake,
but Kyrie's going to get through.
If you were to have put Dame in that spot, do you think that they could have won?
Yeah,
still.
I would put the ball in Dame's hands too.
Yeah,
because he's going to just point to the watch. You know what time it is, and it's Dame time. And like same thing with Kyrie. If they were only up, if the Warriors were only up 1, you want the ball in Kyrie's hands as well because. No, whether it's a double team or a triple team, he can get through defenses, whether it's to get to the paint and kick it out or pit to the paint and just finish with a weird-ass finger roll or something off the glass. Like, he's done it time in and time out. The Christmas game that they had, the move he pulled on Clay, driving into the basket and that, like, stop on a dime, turn around fadeaway with a defender's hand in your face. Like, that's what made Kyrie so great.
There's no doubt he's top 3 handles all time. Yeah.
And that's why it's so hard to rate, people are going to rate Kyrie over Dame, like you guys said, because Kyrie has the ring. But how many rings does Kyrie have? He's 1, right?
With LeBron.
was like,
So I
I can't
mean,
remember. It was like
I was trying to remember too. I was like, yeah, he only has one, and so I mean, in that regard, it's like you got to look at Dame Lillard, the season that he's having. Not too many players have that, especially on a team with no help.
Yeah.
Like, and so to answer your question, it's hard to answer your question, just because like people change.
I don't answer your
records.
question. I'm not going to answer your question. Yeah,
I don't because to be honest, I love both. I love both players. Question. Like I love both players. Say that's the hardest part for me.
The biggest part about the Kyrie comparison to Dame is that if you really look at it, Kyrie is kind of, I guess in the same way, the best blueprint for what Dame should have done basketball-wise for his career. Because the reason why he left the Cavs is because what? He wanted to be his own man on his own team. He joined a Celtics team that didn't necessarily have stars, but they had a growing JT and Jaylen Brown. Didn't work out there the 1 year. He went to the Nets pre-KD, tried to do something there, got injured, had to sit out. They brought in KD the next season. I don't know if that was Kyrie's doing or they just had the opportunity and KD saw Kyrie there, so he said, this is a great landing spot for me. Obviously, we know how that story went this season, and they traded him over to the Mavs. Now, that end part of the season could have happened to anything, could have gone to the Lakers, could have gone to the Mavs, could have gone to the Heat, because there was more behind the closed doors with that front office and the culture that they had with the Nets. But overall, that should be the blueprint that Dame should have looked at it as, where he built something here in Portland, but now that that's not working, I need to try to build something more somewhere else with a winning culture, that with a front office that is willing to go hand over foot to make sure that we are doing the best we can, whether that is with another star or that's going the Kyrie route, looking for a young talent that he thinks I can be there to help nurture them into that culture. So it just, I wouldn't put one over the other, but yes, I know.
I was like, full circle.
I would say if I wanted one on my team outside of other antics, I would probably pick Dame. That's just me, though. Yeah. That was it.
I was expecting something from. I was expecting something else. Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's funny because Actually, I can't really say I'm really fully in agreement. It's an interesting argument for not with Dame specifically, but about the ring culture thing. Yeah, there's a lot of factors that play into it, so it's going to be an ongoing debate probably forever, especially as we kind of enter this time. My one big argument has always been, as long as the league stays competitive, those years I feel like when we knew it was always going to be the Heat and somebody out of the West, or the Cavs and the Warriors, like, it was not entertaining to watch basketball during that time. I feel like because there were so many games that just, you already knew what the end result of the entire, playoffs was going to be. It was not fun to watch the entirety of NBA basketball during that time. And that would be probably my one kind of, but as the league kind of got deeper, I think that the idea of ring culture changed a little bit, because now you kind of have more players to spread out amongst all of the teams. Whereas before it was kind of, you knew who was gonna, you know what I mean? It was unfortunate when a team got together, which leads us to our next kind of talking point, which is the Gilbert Arenas story, which we're all, if you haven't heard the Gilbert Arenas story by now, you're clearly not into basketball, because it's one of the biggest stories going around. Obviously, we're throwing it back to the CP3 trade that was vetoed. I know. It's funny because hearing the details, I was going to say the same thing when he was talking about it. It was like I hadn't really thought of what pieces were in and what pieces were like going out as far as how the trade was going to work. So it's interesting to hear that, according to him, right, it was Lamar Odom and Pau Gasol for CP3. And then
they were working on buying them to Orlando.
Buying them for
Dwight and Gilbert.
I was going to say Orlando Howard, Dwight Howard. Which, I mean, that wouldn't have been wrong then. I mean, he basically owned Orlando at that point. But anyway, so yeah, for Dwight Howard, and I mean, first and foremost, I mean, Nolan, I'm gonna throw it to you first because technically this was this the year after the three had joined together in Miami?
Yes. This was in 2011 offseason.
It was, okay.
I think it was the lockout season.
So, yeah. First and foremost, had this been a team that got together and then had the possibility of kind of what Gilbert Arenas was mentioning, so I'll let you kind of get into what he said about how the team could have been constructed because of the money situation and all that kind of stuff. And obviously, I think his scenario would not have played out because thinking to the time, the Heat had already been put together. So there's no way the team that he had imagined would have been able to be a thing because they were already signed with Miami for a few years. Because in his story, he had mentioned that they could have gotten LeBron James and Chris Bosh.
Gotcha.
But that was just like prior. Those specific names wouldn't have been available because they would already have been under contract. But throwing it over to you, like first and foremost, thoughts on the entire story itself, because I'm sure that was another bit of just another punch to the old gut there.
When you look at overall, the only reason it didn't happen is because the NBA was the part owner of the Hornets.
Mark Cuban.
Well, that too. Oh. But Mark Cuban was able to raise his hand to the NBA. Obviously, if it's like Michael Jordan who's making a trade to the Lakers in that respect, Mark Cuban's not going to call Michael and was like, cancel the trade. What are you doing? Like, that doesn't make any sense for an owner to do. But because it's the NBA, he can call David Stern and say, hey, you guys are part owner. This shouldn't happen, blah, blah, blah. All in all, if a team is a good business enough to convince two other teams to trade them packages for compensation that is equal to what they're getting, why step in and block it, right? Because we've seen outrage.
That was a little interesting thing because it was, they're the part owners of Charlotte, so it's like, how would that have benefited them? I guess from it really wouldn't have benefited them because it's not like the NBA's team is getting the big money draw there.
But they were saying because I think Mark Cuban was crunching the numbers, like Gilbert Arenas kind of noted, if they had taken on Gilbert's contract as well, depending on what the package was for Bynum, for Dwight and him, they still had 24 in cap space to sign anyone they wanted. And that is the basketball reasons that they were trying to avoid, because you just saw a team like the Heat, previously seasoned, sign all these guys who are prime Hall of Famers. So I get it, why it happened. But when you look at it now, you see all these trades going around. You telling me that trade like this wouldn't have been vetoed today if their team wasn't part owned by the NBA?
Can I just say one of the names that was on the free agency market during the time that I felt like they would have gone for it, and it was Amari Stoudemire. Thinking about an Amari Stoudemire at his peak, Dwight Howard, Kobe Bryant, CP3 lineup is, that's pretty damn
stupid. Happens. It happens, right? There's nothing I can do about it. I think it would have been crazy at the time. Finally, something to kind of balance out what the Heat brought to that side of the NBA during the time. Looking at it now in today's NBA, that would just be like another Wednesday of a team being built together.
But for real though.
But it hurts. But at the same time, it's a business. If an owner is able, or GM or president of operations is able to finesse these deals, that is their deal to make. I don't, no offense to Mark Cuban. I think he's a great owner. I love what he's done with the Mavs franchise. But it's very petty sounding to me if that's really what the case was, where he kind of like, Mr. Stern, I don't think that's okay because now they're going to have all this and this and this, and I don't have this and this and this. And I think at the time he was involved in the three-way trade for CP3. I think Lamar was supposed to go, or he ended up going to the Mavs because we traded Lamar there or something like that. So, it's weird to hear, but we can't do anything.
I think it was supposed to be Houston.
See, that's what Gilbert said. But I believe My
Oh,
correct,
yeah,
my
yeah, yeah,
correct
yeah, you're
remember,
right, you're right, yeah.
remembering of it was there was a
Yeah,
three-way
yeah, yeah.
trade with them moving around in a specific order. But,
Mm-hmm.
you know, it's all hindsight now. There's nothing I can do about it.
Do they win in that 7-game series?
I'll tell you this. Because amnesty was a thing and Gilbert assumed that he would have been amnestied from their contract once he got traded over, of all the people in the NBA at that time, who do you think in the NBA could have gotten Gilbert to figure out his shit? And if you
That's
had Gilbert
Yeah.
and Kobe and Dwight and CP3 on a team before signing any other big forwards, I'm just saying.
It's funny. I went the opposite way. I was like, yeah, if he gets amnestied, the Heat. You're right. With Dwayne Wade, LeBron.
I'm just saying.
I went completely. I was like, you're right. Pat Riley would whip him back into shape on the Miami Heat. We were not in sync on that.
I was like, yeah, he's nodding. He gets it. No.
Because you were like, yeah, because he would get amnesty. I'm like, yeah, and the Heat sign him.
And Kobe could have been like, nah, let's keep him for the rest of the season. But
yeah, I mean, yeah, it's true. I mean, but I think that it wasn't that kind of the reason why they would have had the money is if they amnestied him, they would have had the 24 mil
I don't
or whatever.
remember what it was exactly.
I feel like that's the reason why they had to amnesty him so that they could get that chunk of change.
Either way, starting
in
lineup.
his spot. Yeah, stupid. Yeah, throwing it over to you, Jared. I mean, obviously you had the Heatles. Nolan had what would have been the
Lakers. The Lakers.
Yeah, the Lakers.
Because that's good enough of a name.
And yeah, just imagining those teams as they were constructed during that time. First and foremost, how did this story hit you? Were you a little upset that it never came to fruition? And more importantly, who wins in that 7-game series?
I mean, I'm happy it didn't happen, right? Because then, they're going to play them. But,
also, you could not have used your team in 2K during those 2 years if that was the case. That would have been so unfair.
I for sure would have been allowed to use my team. I had to use Andrew Goodlock, Ronnie Price. You leave me alone.
No. I mean, there were times where I didn't use my team because you guys said it wasn't fair, so I just went to go pick another team.
Yeah, because during those years, LeBron James's character could just drive and dunk on anything. I remember one specific time, like we actually watched it back because there was did the little replay, and then we watched it back. And LeBron dunked on all 4 of my interior guys for the Bulls, and I was just like, "This is so stupid." All of my guys
I don't play this anymore.
Getting pushed out of the way.
They all jumped out of the way. He came down the lane, and
they jumped up.
I don't want to play
but then he pushed them away, and he just dunked no interruption in his animation. I was like, "This is so stupid."
No, let's see. Well, when I heard the trade, with Chris Paul, I was actually kind of excited because Chris Paul, when he was at the Hornets with him and Tyson Chandler, and it was just fun to watch, and to put him with Kobe and everybody else would have been fun. I mean, the pieces that they would have lost. I mean, you would have lost what they said, Paul and Lamar,
and
Paul Lamar,
Bynum as well to make the Dwight Howard trade.
The crazy part is this article that I'm reading from the LA Times only said that the Rockets would receive Paul Gasol, the Hornets would receive Lamar Odom and Scola, young guards Kevin Martin, Goran Dragic, and a 2012 first round pick. That's what was said to be. That's why I was going off of that. But I mean, I honestly don't remember the pieces of the trade. That's why I was trying to check with you guys.
I think that even trade sounds right because I kind of remember Goran Dragic being a part of the trade scenario.
I remember Kevin Martin being part of the trade because I remember I kind of like Kevin Martin when he was playing what he did, and he was he was weird ass shot, but he was a great shooter. That was the crazy part. When I heard about it, I was like, oh, that's awesome for the Lakers. It's a big get. I mean, Chris Paul going to a team where, let's be real, he'd have a real good opportunity to win his ring. And then when I heard about the veto, I was like, wait, that's a real thing?
Yeah.
I cannot see.
Hall of
Yeah, I
Famer and
can't get
two-time
it to-
NBA
oh,
champ.
here-
The Knicks has passed. Oh,
Willis Reed just passed away.
Oh my
That's-
gosh.
I know. That's super sad. I mean,
Dude, that,
shout out to Willis Reed. I mean, New York Knicks legend, but I mean, 80 years of life is a pretty long life.
it's good life.
Yeah.
Breaking news for everybody who didn't understand what just happened, because on the pod you probably didn't see me lifting up the. But yeah, Willis Reed, New York Knicks legend, just passed away. We're sending all the prayers and love to his family. Just super unfortunate to lose another legend, but throwing it back to you, Jared. Sorry, excuse me. What were you just saying?
I don't know what I was just saying. No, no. When I heard about the veto, basically, it was like, wow. I didn't know that there were actually like big
didn't know
vetoes like
vetoes
that in
could
trade.
exist.
Most times it was just like,
Yeah,
it was just,
that was the
I
first
didn't
time I
know,
heard
yeah,
it.
I didn't know about it. I thought it was just so because you always hear like, oh, like they were asking for too much. Oh, we weren't willing to give this up. But you don't ever hear somebody say, no, we're going to veto that trade to make it happen. And I was like super confused by it. So like at the time, I was like, dude, that's just weird. And then when you hear the Gilbert Arenas and everything, it's just like you never know the backside or the outer workings or the behind the curtain workings of things, because I mean there's so much that goes on, right? Phone calls are made, people are happy, unhappy, people are trying to like, oh, we heard this and we're like, that doesn't help our conference at all, so we're gonna try and make this not happen. And
This
like,
veto
I
single-handedly
don't know. I feel bad
sent
for Chris
Lamar
Paul.
Odom down that spiral that is now his life. Or this trade, that trade
Exactly.
itself.
That trade itself, and then you have like Chris Paul, who ended up in the other with the other LA team, trying to build something there. You know, a Scola State where he was, Dragic the same. I mean, there's just like it kind of it messed with a lot of different people. And I think, to be honest, like we talk about Chris Paul being one of the best point guards, not have a ring. I think that literally was his opportunity to say, "Hey, get the monkey off my back," and then he can play even more free, because now he's like right now you can tell he's playing for a ring every single time he steps on the court, because to prove to all the haters that he deserves to be put where he's put. You know, there's always the backlash of talk about Chris Paul, and I think that's the one thing that always like, well, you don't have a ring yet, and that would have been his one opportunity with that team, you know. So,
I mean,
who's
let's not
my
forget
7-game
the
series
Lob City
again?
Clippers
Sorry,
really
again.
choked
Sorry.
it up those years that they were together.
No, they did. Well, they didn't really choke it up. Everybody just kept getting hurt. Like that was the
I was
craziest
just saying,
part.
I was like, I don't think it was
They
choking
just kept
so much
getting
as just
injury-ridden.
unfortunate luck. Yeah. Actually, if
Yeah.
you really listen to JJ Redick talk about that whole thing, I think he had that one where he interviewed Blake Griffin. I mean, it's insane how close they were. And obviously, I think the one I remember the most was the one where they almost beat the Warriors, or they were up like 3-0, I think, right? Was that them that choked
I
it
think
to
they
the Warriors?
lost 3-1 lead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, 3-1.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
they literally could have won that, and because of like everything that happened with, I think Blake ended up getting hurt, or Chris Paul, one of the two ended up getting hurt, and that it kind of just sent like the momentum the other way, and it just.
I think that was the Chris Paul injury. Was it his wrist
Yeah.
injury?
It's either his
I was
wrist
gonna
or
say it was
hamstring
one
or
of the
something.
two.
It's
Yeah.
always one of those.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Unfortunate.
And who was my 7-game series again? Sorry, just to refresh my mind.
Oh, the Heatles versus the
The Lakers.
vetoed Lakers. Oh,
The
the
vetoed
Heatles versus the
Lakers?
vetoed.
Oh. I'm just gonna have to stick with my guns and just say the Heat.
Ooh.
Put your
You
two
said-
KD
Okay,
together,
okay.
Nolan. I'll put mine
He
together.
said LeBron's better than Kobe.
I'm just saying, man. Our role guys were still, a lot of them were people from the championship years. You guys had to pick up all new guys for your role guys.
It's okay.
Ooh, fight,
My role
fight,
guys knew,
fight.
my
fight,
role guys
fight.
knew their role.
Okay.
Nah, I'm just kidding. We don't got enough time for you guys to fight. I didn't even realize we still
Yeah,
have
we don't have enough
a
time
few
for us
more
to fight,
stories to
guys.
get
Come
to. Quick hitter thoughts. Don't even have to go too deep into it. Michael Jordan selling or possibly selling his majority stake in the Charlotte Hornets. Overall, whose fault is it as far as the team's lack of success? Do you put it more on Michael Jordan himself, the players themselves, the coaching, small market location? What is it for you that you think you take away from Michael Jordan's time till now, kind of drafting and trading and doing all that? Nolan. I mean, sorry, excuse me. Yeah, Nolan. Jared was just talking. Yeah.
Nolan.
I don't know. It depends.
Nolan.
How involved of an owner was he? I know he goes to the games. I know he's comes to their practice facilities. But is he an owner?
I want to say he's more of an approval
Yeah.
guy. Like they come up with the trade and he's smart, like yes or
Right.
no. Majority of it was yes. You know what I'm saying? I don't
So-
think he ever really was like
It really
making
depends.
the
I mean,
calls.
if he was never involved in the first place, then that's probably on his end of the stick. Because if you are an owner and you know that this is a business that constantly each year has to change in a different way, then it probably is you. They did some decent things, bringing in Gordon Hayward in the offseason, drafting LaMelo Ball, but that's only recent in things that have just happened. And their teams are still struggling. You have,
I'm going to throw this into a little wrench in there because I know Charles Barkley has spoke out on this because of now their kind of tenuous relationship. They no longer kind of are friends at the moment. Well, from Charles Barkley's end, he says he is still friends with Michael, but Michael is no longer really like contacting him or talking to him because of some things that he said on TNT regarding the Charlotte Hornets and how he kind of mismanaged the team. And also threw in there that he thinks that Michael kind of hired friends in a way to kind of fill out the staff there. So, yeah, I mean, I just wanted to throw that because there was that nugget. Charles Barkley dropped that in an interview, and I was kind of like, wow, very eye-opening to see kind of whether it be kind of too loyal or, I don't know, his pseudo super competitiveness or I'm not sure.
hey, if that really is the case where he just bought people in who are his friends, kind of very reminiscent of Disney. When Chapek got put in position, he brought a lot of his business friends into the chair seats or the different positions, opening up new departments so his friends could take over that brand new department.
Was that lady that just
We'll talk about that. That was great.
Sorry, not to think this about that. Gotcha. Okay, gotcha. Yeah, right. Moving on, basketball. Gotcha.
But yeah, I think that if that is the case, then yeah, I mean, Charles Barkley has a right to call it out. Should he have done it on public national television? I don't know about that, but there is a part of me that thinks, would this really have been such a big deal, or would this have really been so scrutinized if it wasn't Michael Jordan as the name of part-time or part owner? So I think that it's very 50-50. Yes, I do think it probably is part his fault for not making this more of an effort to win. I mean, if you probably interchanged him with the Portland Trailblazers, their trajectory has been the exact same. They're doing small things, but nothing that really sticks to the wall.
But it probably would have looked better just because he had Dame Lillard.
He probably
there
would
the
have
whole
at least
time.
had that franchise tag on it, and then it could have done something to say, hey, come here because we have Dame. But I don't think he's done very well of managing that organization. And if he is selling it, that's exactly what you would assume a business owner would do. If I'm not doing well running my business, I'm going to sell it to someone else who probably will do it better. So kudos for him for finally putting that up for auction, I guess you could say, and then we'll see where it goes from there. But I don't think he was a great owner. When it comes to normal businesses, you can be a part owner just so that you get that passive income. But if the part-time ownership business is an NBA franchise, you can't just have that as a passive income. You have to be active in it.
Yeah, that's true. Turn over to you, Jared. Do you kind of see similar points with Nolan, or are you kind of seeing it at a different angle?
No, I'm in agreement with Nolan. I don't think he really did a whole lot with it. He was very he did the ownership part of I'll show up to the games, try to be Mark Cuban and do those kind of things. And in the long run, I mean, you hire friends who probably weren't qualified for the jobs. That's the kind of result you're probably going to end up getting. Nolan said as well, that you're under more of a microscope because you are Michael Jordan, which sucks in the long run. But I mean, when you're a big name like that, I mean, for anybody,
same thing with any of the greats,
sports, right? In other sports, you're always going to be under a microscope of all these little things that happen. Is it time for him to sell? Probably. I'm surprised he didn't wait a little longer. Do it a little earlier. Sorry, but
I was just saying, wait a little
I was
longer.
no, I'm surprised.
Wait till
sorry. Yeah,
LeBron James.
I think he should. You know why yeah, for real though. But I feel like a lot of it had to do with. I was reading an article of I think how much he bought it for and what it's worth now, like the price inflation of things, and I think he gets so much more out of it. Like the number is ridiculous. I think he bought it for something in the millions, and now it's $1 billion franchise.
As I said,
Along those lines.
There are parts of it like that you have to give him credit, because obviously building something up in value is hard to do. And I don't know if it's just his name or if it's because literally, I mean, I don't know what else could have.
Did he buy
the only thing that would have got him there was
franchise when they changed it back to
Hornets? That's how it is. No, they were still the Bobcats.
He bought it when they were still the Bobcats. Yeah.
It was still the Bobcats, I believe, when he bought them, and then they switched names over and everything.
I want to say his first year was the weird
that's
Kid Gilchrist years, maybe.
I believe
somewhere around there,
right.
Around that time. Yeah.
Yeah. And so
Michael
for me,
Kidd Gilchrist,
like,
wow.
That's a name.
Shout out to that guy. I was like,
that's a name.
I was like, if you'd like to join us on the pod.
Nolan. Show the shot, Nolan.
Don't show the shot if we want him on the pod.
Explain your shot to us, and we'd love to have you. No, but I mean, from a business standpoint, I mean, Jordan's always a big gambler too, so maybe he's running low on funds and needs that money.
The Jordan brand, he ain't running low on funds. Come on now.
I was just saying, like, I don't know where low, but let's just make $1 billion bets over here.
Likes to throw money around like there's no
he
tomorrow.
Does his golf and
you saw all the stories of like when he golfs.
I was like,
and everything.
No, they say he's frugal, but he will put big money bets down.
You got it, flaunt it.
It's like yeah. I guess anyway, that's neither here nor there. We're not trying to tell people how to spend their money. Continuing on to the next topic. Going to get into this one real quick. Obviously, again, we have the Nuggets and the 76ers near the top of their respective conferences, or I think the Nuggets are still at the top. Are they number one still? Okay. Nuggets are still number one. 76ers are third right now. But Jokic and Embiid leading the MVP race. Two of these teams, I mean, they both did take L's recently. One took one last night to the Chicago Bulls. But anyway, breaking the curse. Here we go. No, just joking. But anyway, watching these two guys who are obviously way far and away the MVP favorites, who do you guys kind of see taking the MVP race between Jokic and Embiid? Either one. So open table. All you.
Well, I mean, what? Jokic is averaging a triple-double now.
Yeah.
And as a center, that's impressive. Yes, he's won 2 years in a row already, but his team is number one in the West. Joel Embiid, we've been saying for a long time, we think he's due for a long run in the playoffs at least. MVP conversations, he's still in there. But, it is going to come down to we talked about it earlier. I don't like always saying that it has to come down to this, but it is going to come down to the statistics of this kind of situation. And not so much what you're averaging, but what your team is averaging when you're not playing. You want to be considered the most valuable player because.
But who? It's just like. This seems like a roundabout way to get to no answer again, Nolan. You give me a definitive answer. Who do you have as MVP?
In this situation, I would probably say that I do think that on a specific day in the middle of spring, when the sun is highest in the sky.
Okay, here we go. Just say the name.
Hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I think if Jokic is eligible to win MVP again this year, Jokic deserves to win MVP this year.
And on. Throw it over to you, Jared. Who do you got? Jokic and Embiid.
He's like LeBron James. Hey.
Austin Reeves. No. Nah, I'm just kidding. I'm kind of with Nolan. I'm gonna agree that I'm gonna go with Jokic. He's averaging a triple double.
We gotta make Jared go first
best-
so that he kind of say I'm
best-
kind of with whoever's just went.
Well, I mean,
make Jared go
I'm not
first
gonna lie.
next
You want me to
time.
share my screen? I literally have both their stats up, and I'm looking at it, and I've been looking at it. I'm like, Jokic is averaging 25, 12, and 10 basically. And on any team, like that's just somebody you want. He's a big man. He passes well. He can score. He's gonna rebound for you. He does all the things. I mean, granted, Embiid's first in the league, 33.6 points per game, seventh in rebounds at 10.3, and he's 50th with only 4 assists. Like my MVP, of course, is going to be the best player on my team, but he's also going to be the person who makes everybody else around them better, and that's what Jokic does. And so, like, despite this third year, I think he deserves to have the MVP again because he fills all 3 of those categories for me at least. And so I'm thinking that's why I'm taking Jokic, not because Nolan said it, because that's why I'm taking Jokic.
What do you think?
For this, Jokic by far and away. Yeah, I don't even think Embiid really has a shot, to be honest. But I'm going to say one more thing because we're getting pretty crunched for time here. But with Jokic specifically, do you guys kind of feel like in the next few years, if the Nuggets never make the finals, do you want to see him still kind of taking home these MVP awards? I know they are regular season awards. However, do you want to kind of see, does that play into your thought process at all as far as like their success and how they're able to, like, say maybe he continues to average a triple-double, continues to get his team to the playoffs, but maybe gets a number 1 seed often, but gets bounced in the first round or gets bounced in the second round of playoffs? Like, does that factor in at all for your idea of what an MVP should be?
You want Jared to go first this time?
Either of you.
I'll go first this time, Ben.
This isn't like a name thing.
Honestly, no. It doesn't make a difference to me. If you're talking about his legacy as a overall player, yes,
that's a great point.
But if you're talking about as a regular season MVP and what he puts up through 82 games or however many games he does play for that season, like that's where I think you can't talk about their postseason
I only
success.
brought this up
But if
because
you're talking about his best in the, like where you're ranking him all time and not being able to get the job done, it's kind of like looking at DeMar and Kyle Lowry when they were in the East with the Raptors. They were the best regular season team and couldn't do anything in the playoffs.
Trash.
So I mean that's just like how I kind of like perceive it at least.
Yeah, it's funny. I only bring this up because of Kendrick Perkins kind of mentioning that in that one kind of controversial take that he had with JJ Redick, where he was basically saying, like, you get a guy like that who doesn't really do anything in the postseason. Like, why am I still looking at him as a great player? But I think you hit the nail on the head with that one. I would love to hear your thoughts.
I agree with Jared.
We're going to move to our final. Yeah, there we go. Yeah.
Thanks, Nolan.
I was going to talk about Lonzo Ball a little bit. First and foremost, I think everyone here has said in the
World's
exactly, like
lion.
it's one of those things where it's unfortunate that he keeps kind of going through these things, and from the human perspective, you want a player like him who should be in the prime of his career to be able to enjoy the prime of his career and actually live out his dream. On the flip side of it, as a Chicago Bulls fan, it is very unfortunate because we got to see a small preview of what it would be like to have Lonzo Ball healthy with this team, especially with them all kind of not really being the greatest facilitators. There are a lot of isolation players on this team. But more importantly, it's just unfortunate that he has to go through this again, and we have to kind of see this happen again with the Chicago Bulls. We obviously know the other big name that went through this as a point guard, having 3 surgeries in as little or in basically the same amount of years. It's unfortunate. And you never want to see that happen to anybody. But most importantly, for me personally, I mean, prayers up for you, Lonzo Ball, hoping that you can kind of come back and be healthy again. But it'll really, really suck if this ends up being kind of, the end of your career but hoping for the best for you for the future. Continuing on, last little thing, yay or nay, bringing back an old segment. I'm going to give it to you. Like I said, hit me with them yay or nays. No need for full-on explanations. Starting at number 1, there will be a major upset in the first round matchups of the playoffs. Yay or nay, starting with you, Nolan. Ooh, it'll be an interesting time. Number 2, Kyrie Irving stays with the Mavs after this year. Nolan.
Nay.
What was that one?
Kyrie Irving will stay with the Mavs after
No, what
this
did
year.
Nolan say?
Nay.
Oh, okay. I sounded like yeah. I heard both. I was like, I heard both, but yay.
Number 3, assuming KD returns, Phoenix will win the championship this year. Nolan.
Yeah.
Jared.
Nay.
Yeah, boy. Number 4, Wizards will trade Bradley Beal. Nolan.
To who?
Oh, no, there's no who. It's just they will or not.
Who are you
Yay.
wishing to? Nay.
The Trailblazers will trade Dame Lillard. Nolan.
Nay, because of Dame.
Jared.
Say nay as well.
The Clippers will knock the Lakers out of the playoffs.
Nay.
Nay.
Bias. The Warriors don't make the finals this year.
Yay.
Damn, that's a hard one. Yay.
Are we cooling on Trae Young as a superstar?
Yay.
Yay.
Are we cooling on Zion Williamson as a superstar?
Nay.
Nay.
And finally, are we heating up on Jalen Brunson being a legitimate all-star?
All-star?
Yes, not superstar. I did not go that far.
Yay.
He just has to make it one time, right?
Well, I just mean it more as him really being deserving of that
Because
title.
you said like no, not a superstar. So I say yay.
Right on. And that will do it for us here on Athletes Anonymous Presents After the Buzzer, bringing it back with that old school segment. Boys, where can the people find you? Starting with
You guys
Nolan.
can find me on Instagram, Twitter, and Twitch at Nolan KYT, NOLAN KYT.
Jared, where can the people find you?
On Instagram and Twitch at JShirai, JShirai, and on Twitter at JShirai808.
Right on. And you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, and Twitch at KONE. That's KAYOHKNEE. You can also check us out on Instagram at the Poi N Soy Podcast. Fire content being posted over there all day, every day. Yeah, okay, that was lame. Anyway, I was like, we didn't have any sound effects or anything. There we go. That's what I was waiting for. But that'll do it for us here on Athletes Anonymous Presents After the Buzzer. As always, it has been a pleasure. It has been a joy from all of us here at
Good
Poi N
vibes,
Soy.
everybody.
Bang, bang.
Shoots.